Looking at the profile of the audience, we may like to start with the key fundamental players in this business, which is telecom, which has brought us to this whole lively discussion that going forward today, and also with the future of work, what we're trying to do is around the telecom itself. So let's hear from Vinod. I think Vinod is there, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, I'm here.
Good evening. Good evening to you. You have been part of a major, one of the largest companies probably in the world in terms of telecom infrastructure. I think you've seen a whole lot of change before Corona and post-pandemic, actually. So I think if you can educate us really in terms of what went right, what didn't go well, and how do you really see as the change going forward. I think we have seen a lot of new things here, like work from home, even the last mile capability that we are talking around. All these things being serviced with your mobile towers and things like that. I think you have been a phenomenal, good things that has been done as part of the industry. I think you have been delivering a lot of results for the country itself. So, do you have the technology to really support and grow in terms of what we do, and how do you really see in terms of predicting the problems, and how do you want to do something different?
Right. So thank you so much, Mouli. I think from my point of view, it has been an education. The last 2 years have been an education in what was initially in terms of an industry, a difficult industry, has become a significantly more attractive proposition, because the dependence on telecom has never been more evident. We've noticed this before pandemic, during situations like the floods and so on, and even now with Amphan and Yas. It's interesting that the perspective of several of even the authorities and so on is geared towards availability of telecom being suddenly a more important factor than perhaps it used to be earlier. Be that as it may, I think the fundamentals of, I will look at telecom in two ways. One is obviously the need to do more and the increase in demand in our industry, which is always a good thing. But the second is really that as a business, we ourselves are the borderline of physical and digital. I have over 20,000 people in the field that are doing things like maintenance of the towers or refilling diesel in the towers and so on. So, when you have something like a pandemic, that also challenges our own models in terms of what is it that we are doing and how is it that we are maintaining these. And there is also a very interesting phenomenon of this whole convergence, Molly, between the operational technology that we use and the IT stuff that we use. So, in the end of the day, as these things converge, our ability to do AIOps or related concepts, our ability to do self-healing, governing, remote repair, remote diagnosis, these things are becoming cardinally important to us, because one is, of course, you have a much smaller window to fix things. Two is, it is physically difficult to get people out to sites. We always knew that. And you're right in the sense that this pandemic has removed some of those, I don't want to work this way because I don't have to kind of a syndrome that kind of existed. So there is an acceleration to the remote. But I think, the biggest thing, and this is something that my CEO says a lot of the time, we had two challenges before. One was finding out what is the problem. And then two was taking what we have found and fixing the problem. So if you like, it is from the ground to the analytics, and from the analytics to the action. And we call it internally in Indus, we call it closed looping. Okay. Because, you take an analytics report which says these 50 sites, there's a problem. Now somebody prints that off, or somebody takes it out of the analytics system and then invariably ends up going to some other system and punching work orders against those. Say now, I will actually assign this to this partner, and this partner will go out and do something at the site. And this, to my mind, is the perfect example of, situations that are tailor-made for a AIOps or a intelligent closed looping. And, this is really the holy grail in our industry. Because the more of these administrative jobs we can take out, the more we can put our energies into the front end of our business, and the quicker we can close these issues. So I think, those are the key trends, and I don't believe that should be different between us. In a model, it's curious. We are much more similar to a utility. We're more like an electricity company, or, in that sense, we are a facilities company for the telecom world. And I believe that these are the models when you talk about resilience.
More a utility company than become a telecom provider. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's incidental that our business happens to be telecom, and obviously this means our technology is a lot more amenable to IT services models. But save that, I think when you talk about resilience, this is really the model, which is when you get the companies like ourselves, when you get the companies like the utilities, when you get the companies like the large, distribution chains into a AIOps kind of framework, then you achieve true resilience. Because otherwise, you will end up chasing a lot of low value added activity, as opposed to kind of fixing things in time and by themselves. So that's, I think, the viewpoint from telecom, and certainly from people that are, that spread out infrastructure providers or support providers like ourselves. I think these are our key challenges.
Okay, let's hear from like Balaji. I think you have been dealing with a lot of customers. Do you think for somebody like telecom, particularly like hearing what you heard from Krishnan, this becomes a AIOps is a magic wand, or how do you look at it?
Yeah,
Balaji,
I think he brought up some very, very interesting points and practical points. And Vinod, I really appreciate the practicality of what you brought out, rather than trying to boil the ocean and figuring out everything can be done with the click of a button. We were actually talking to a couple of actual telecom providers, right? One large one in South India and one pan-India guys. And their biggest challenge was two parts, almost similar to your thought process. And we are actually deploying it in one of them right now as we speak, is that they have zillions of customers, and they were finding it extremely difficult, one, to be proactive to find the problem, saying that, oh, okay, this particular zone or this particular area could potentially have an outage or could potentially lead to some problems. And second one, having found that out, really going to the root of the problem, rather than throwing back and forth and making the customer wait. Create, as you rightly said, create a bunch of work order and then get that sorted out. So I think proactively monitoring the solution until the last mile, and then not only just proactively monitoring, but with all this data and noise keep coming in, right? You never know where the real problem is. Getting to the root of the problem and saying these four could potentially be areas where the problem is, and narrow it down so that even if the problem occurs, first of all, avoid the problem. But if the problem occurs, be able to get to the root of the problem very quickly. And third point, which I'm sure you're also hearing from your telecom customers, is the volume, right? I mean, it's no longer like a hospital. I don't have like a 80 patient, 100 patient coming per day. Here I am having like 80 million, 90 million people accessing at the same time. And if I use monitoring, I'll get like 10 times that volume of data coming in. And then how do I scramble through the noise in that and find out where the problem is, which part of the sector is the problem, and then avoid the problem. And if the problem has happened, can I remediate it automatically? Can I, if I find the problem, I can't remediate it, and at least tell what exactly the problem is so that the service engineer or somebody who's responsible can go and fix it immediately, and the end user experience or the customer experience is higher. These are some real problems we have been juggling with in the telecom industry and in the consumer industry particularly. And that's where some of our solutions are being able to help and address. Because for volume, the quantum of geographical spread and distribution, and more importantly, getting to the root of the problem, keeping not just the outages in mind, but the customer experience in mind, or the end user in mind, which is ultimately what decides how the telecom industries are going to foster. So those are things which are there, but you brought out some very practical points. And I think they are working with IIT Madras, and thanks to the professor, trying to get him on board. He's actually part of the data center, artificial intelligence and machine learning innovation hub. We actually have figured out how to solve that problem, and we are rolling it out to a couple of places. So it will be interesting to probe further later on, maybe.
In fact, if I can just quickly intervene, Molly, I think one of the lovely things that you said, Balaji, which resonates with me, is the idea of intelligently filtering this noise.
Correct.
Because, to close a recognized problem to action is a known problem.
Correct.
To recognize problem, unfortunately, is not a known problem. I mean, especially when
True.
you have a number of things that today we, for instance, do a lot of correlation between our alarms. So, finding out that site is, you say, okay, if the temperature is this and if the conditions are this, then the probability that the site is on fire is pretty high. But, that to get to that conclusion is still not as intuitive as it should be. And I think appreciate the efforts you guys are making. I'd certainly be keen to understand that.
Nice. To understand. Thank you, Vinod, for your inputs, valuable inputs.